We're talking with Edward Brown, CEO of Core Edge Image and Charisma Institute. Before we get into the meat of this discussion, what makes you an expert on charisma? What is your background?
Well, my passion for charisma comes from the 1970s. I'm a child of the 1970s, the music, the movies, the characters, Evel Knievel. So for me, my passion stemmed from the 1970s growing up. Since then, my body work has centered on charisma, from writing 10 to 15 books on charisma to speaking to audiences across the country and throughout the world on charisma, as well as researching charisma. So you can more or less say that my whole life is surrounding this concept, this philosophy, this infrastructure.
How do you define charisma?
The Core Edge Image and Charisma Institute defines charisma as the creating of perceptions that impact the mind and emotions of others through flair, finesse, and good language. In other words, the ability to persuade, to influence, to impact through sheer personality, through articulation and self-expression is defined as charisma.
Why is charisma important to law enforcement? Aren't police there to serve and protect as opposed to being effective communicators?
Once upon a time, an average officer could just come on the scene or deal with people on a moderate level, if you will, just handling 911 calls. But I believe that the transforming and changing of society has made it whereby officers have to be more businesslike. They have to adhere to the business principles like most companies and corporations. Although law enforcement and municipalities don't necessarily have profitable motives as revenue generators, but invariably business is encapsulating and crossing all dynamics of industries and professions, and policing is part of it. Law enforcement is part of that. So I believe that I'm seeing a change in the dynamics of what people are calling for, and a change how organizations and departments have to deal with this change.
Okay, now you're a former Atlanta police officer. Do you remember any charismatic supervisors that you work with? If so, what traits do they exhibit?
A rousing no. I don't remember any one charismatic supervisor, and I tell you why. Because leadership inside most police departments are not geared towards enhancing morale, motivation, or being persuasive and bringing the troops in. It's more or less protocol, etiquette, hierarchy, rank and file. Do this, do that. If you don't do it, you're insubordinate. The changing times required, if you're going to be effective, but particularly with these millennial children, you have to deal with them differently, and you have to be more persuasive and more impacting, and they ask a lot of questions, and they've been reared to be seen as special, so therefore you have to use a different type of style and skills to move that particular troop of individuals. So I'm thinking that the people I served under, given the time that I policed, it wasn't necessary to be charismatic, but given the multimedia aspect of things, the changing society, you have to be more engaged, more charismatic, and more magnetic when it comes to dealing with people.
Okay, what trends in law enforcement do you see where charisma will be more relevant within law enforcement in the coming years?
Business still. As long as we still deal with municipalities almost like welfare departments and or don't mess up and you got a job for life, whereas we've seen that's changing, because now we're seeing even fire departments, police departments going under because of recessionary times. Everyone has to make the cut these days. So if we're not operating as a business and professionally and understanding the operations that go around a business, then it's going to be problematic. That's the trend. So charisma is part of the business trend of saying this is how we do things. We did things different in the past. Now this is how we do things currently. So I believe that charismatic leadership, given the dynamics of training new and, say, existing supervisors, will allow departments to improve, but also understand that the business model has to trickle down to the troops and police officers, and understand that their role and responsibility is also to be engaging. So these skill sets have to be penetrating and evolved in all departments across the sector.
What tips would you give a law enforcement supervisor about being more charismatic?
Every day, a supervisor, sergeant above, has an opportunity to motivate and to engage and persuade the troops in roll call. Every day. For that 10 to 15 minutes you're speaking to the troops before they go out, you have an opportunity to show them and infuse in them the aspirational aspects of why they're there and what policing is about and what this department is about. 1. 2. Become the icon, become the ideal of the supervisor. Become the person who, when an officer comes out of the academy and goes to their watch, they say, that's who I want to be like. you're fit, you're trim, you command presence, you're engaging, you listen. All those kind of things that make for a charismatic leader, and therefore the troops not only want to work for you, they want to work overtime and go overboard for you, because they're again, they say, I want to make them happy. And by golly, by gum, when I actually ascend the heights and become promoted, I want to be like that. That is charismatic leadership. So that's to be sharp, be image conscious, be articulate, engage people, and finally, always teach yourself and involve yourself in professional development. Always ask yourself, how can I do better? How can I learn more? How can I share and diffuse information? What difference does it make on events that go around the world that ties into the local aspect of policing? So when we become image conscious, smarter, more informed, and engage ourselves in charismatic leadership skills, we become the go-to people that officers want to engage ourselves and be a part of. And again, we want to be an iconic aspect for officers coming behind us as we move up the rank, and as they come behind us to move up the rank also.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brown.
You're quite welcome.